What if I told you that Alaska, or that America and Russia are 3 miles apart? It's true, but you have to go to a very specific spot to see it. This is the story of the Diomede Islands. The Diomede Islands are in the Bering Strait, which is the passage of water which separates mainland Russia with mainland Alaska or the United States. Now, the Diomedes is practically in the center of this strait, and they're actually considered to be the northern end of the Bering Strait. Everything north of there is considered part of the Chukchi Sea. Everything south of the Diomedes is considered part of the Bering Strait. If you're wondering where you've ever heard the name the Bering Strait from, the Bering Strait is a famous stretch of water in the TV show The Deadliest Catch. The heart of the crab grounds is I don't want to say well south, a little less than 100 miles south of the Diomede Islands. So you'll never see the deadliest fish crab boats this far north. The Diomede Islands are located at about 169 degrees west and a little south of 66 degrees north, which is the Arctic Circle. So south of the Arctic Circle by about 30 miles or so. And so you're like, well, how does this make Russia and the United States 3 miles apart? Well, Big Diomede is on the west side and Little Diomede is on the east side. Big Diomede is Russian and Little Diomede is American. The two islands are about 2 miles apart. 2 to 2.5 miles apart, depending on whose measurements you're using. Big Diomede has been uninhabited for years now, for decades. The Russians use Big Diomede as a military base, mostly to eavesdrop on those horrible, terrible Americans. Whereas Little Diomede, on the other hand, is actually the home of an Inupiat village, and the Inupiat being natives who have historically populated the region. They did used to exist on Big Diomede until the Russian government forced them off and relocated them. This has not happened on the U.S. side. Little Diomede still has Inupiat individuals, and the entire population of that island resides in a small cliffside village called Diomede. The population as of the last census was 82. So a lot of people there. So Sarah Palin has never visited Little Diomede, but if she ever did, she literally could say the same joke that was made about her on Saturday Night Live. I can see Russia from my house. Because a lot of people in Diomede can see Russia from their house. There's only been one politician that's ever made the visit to Diomede and Little Diomede Island, and that was former Senator Ted Stevens, who made the trip in 2001. And Uncle Ted, as people in Alaska still call him to this day, even though he's long gone, remarked when he got there, "I didn't know you guys were this remote." Obviously going to an extremely remote island of 82 people is not a vote-getting tactic. I think Uncle Ted went out of sheer curiosity that this little island off the west coast of Alaska was actually part of Alaska. And he stayed overnight. Accommodations, of course, in Diomede and Little Diomede Island, you don't have any commercial accommodations. So accommodations for him were made in the school. And I don't think he had to worry too much about his security staff. I'm sure he always traveled with one, but in this case, I think they had kind of a light work day. Now, Big Diomede, of course, economically is entirely driven by the Red Army, which has occupied the island for several decades now. Little Diomede, though, just across the way there, less than 3 miles, has a subsistence economy. Whaling is a thing there, like it is in much of coastal Alaska. And the one export that the Diomede residents or natives have, they're expert ivory carvers. So this is really the island's main export. I mean, they can hunt for tusks, and then they're also master carvers of it. And so that is kind of really the main export and what little economic activity exists there. As far as traditional jobs are concerned, Little Diomede really just has the school, the city, quote-unquote, government, and some government utilities. That's kind of it. The Diomede School is part of a very large remote school district that covers islands in the Bering Strait School District. In the last school year, it had between kindergarten through 12, 20 students, which is a pretty good ratio with the overall population of 82. When there were Inupiat people on Big Diomede, the peoples used to be able to walk across the strait to visit each other on a regular basis. Now, when the Russian Red Army kicked the native Inupiat people off of Big Diomede, this obviously was no longer the case. But they did used to be able to visit each other by walking across the frozen strait in the wintertime. Not very possible in the summertime because it does get just warm enough up there to create open water, as you would see on the Deadliest Catch. In the months from June to maybe early September, the strait is open water. Now, future developments on the Diomedes. Now, the other thing to remember about the Diomedes is the international dateline jogs east to split the two islands. It runs down the international border between the two countries. And because of this, the international dateline, Big Diomede is about 21 hours ahead of Little Diomede, which gives the two islands their interesting nicknames. Little Diomede is called Yesterday Island. Big Diomede is called Tomorrow Island. So the Inupiat people who used to cross between the islands were probably some of the earliest time travelers in history, because they could travel 21 hours in either direction. They would either be moving ahead in time or they would be traveling backwards. Either way, they are really the world's first time travelers, or were. Now, as far as future event developments are concerned in this area, there is only one notable one to discuss here. That is a potential future project which is called the Bering Strait Bridge. It has been proposed either as a bridge or as a tunnel. The Diomedes sit smack between the westernmost point of the Alaska mainland and the easternmost point of the Russian mainland. That eastern point of Russia is called Cape Dezhnev, and on the American side, the Alaskan western tip is called Point Prince of Wales. So if you ever look at Alaska on a map, you see that westernmost tip that kind of sticks out off of the western side of central Alaska into the ocean. That tip is Cape Prince of Wales. A Bering Strait bridge would potentially connect these two spots. It is about 26 miles from Cape Prince of Wales to Little Diomede Island, and it's about 32 miles from Cape Dezhnev to Big Diomede Island. This is the path that a potential bridge would cross, with a smaller 2.5 mile wide bridge between the two Diomede Islands. And you're thinking, why would anybody build this bridge? As Randy Moss says around here, straight cash, homie. The economic development that a bridge of this nature would create is tremendous. Now, as long as Putin is busy blowing money and blowing lives in Ukraine, this bridge will not happen. But under future Russian administration and future American administrations, it could. And the one product that would traverse this bridge in massive amounts to make it economically viable, of course, is crude oil, which is produced in spades on both sides, on both the Russian and the American side. The engineering of this bridge would actually not be terribly difficult. As you can see on Deadliest Catch, the Bering Strait is not the nicest of bodies of water. So ice flows, the same ones that crush the ships on the show, also could crush pillars on the bridge. However, there are ways to build with concrete pillars that are shaped to deflect these crushing ice flows, and the pillars can be built at such an angle at the bottom that the concrete could actually crush the ice as it moves into it. We have the technology for this today. But one of the biggest obstacles that would be in place, of course, being this far north, is the climate. Construction on this bridge could only function about 4 months a year. As I mentioned, it does get somewhat above freezing during those months. Also, being very close to the Arctic Circle, in those summer months, you would have close to 24-hour daylight, not quite because they're not quite to the Arctic Circle. And then in the wintertime, it would be the exact opposite. In the January to February months, the sun barely peeks over the horizon, maybe 2 hours a day. So construction in the winter months is basically a no-go. But in the summertime, they would have nearly 24-hour daylight to go full bore. It's basically said that parts of the bridge would be prefabricated elsewhere and then shipped to the strait. And you'd have, of course, it would be in 3 segments. And, of course, the Diomedes would play a significant role because the economies of these places would change dramatically overnight. The Diomedes would be service stops and service areas for traffic on the bridge. And, however, vehicular traffic would not be the only method of crossing on this bridge. Most designs on this bridge would also have pipelines going underneath the roadway, which of course would transport that super valuable crude oil. And that would make the whole project economically viable. The other challenge with this bridge is getting roadways to even reach the strait. Right now, the closest Alaskan roadway to the strait is about 500 miles to the southeast. And there's another approach about 600 miles to the east, just west of Fairbanks. So new roadway or trainway or both would likely need to be constructed to Cape Prince of Wales. On the Russian side, it's even worse. The closest roadway to Cape Dezhnev is about 1,000 miles west of there. So they would have to build roadways and railways over that large amount of land. And in both cases, much of that area is permafrost. So road construction on permafrost, of course, has its own challenges, as the Canadians have found out with some of their newer roads that cross the Arctic Circle. These roads would have the same challenges and would have to have the same construction techniques. It is estimated that construction of roadways on both sides of the strait, you're running about $10 million per mile. So that means on the Alaskan side, let's do some quick math here. 500 miles times $10 million a mile. That's about $5 billion. On the Alaskan side, on the Russian side, of course, you double that because you're talking about 1,000 miles now. So instead of $10 billion in Russia, it would cost $10 billion US dollars. As I mentioned before, Putin is busy pissing away all kinds of money in Ukraine. Russia doesn't have the money to do this at this immediate moment. The situation in Russia would have to get economically much more stable than it is now in order for them to be able to even contribute to building the links for this project. Now, what a Bering Strait Bridge project would do, though, that would be extremely interesting in a future What If I Told You episode, it would then become, what if I told you that you could drive from Panama to Paris? The road links would make this possible, because then once you get to the Russian mainland, of course, you would connect to the European road network and be able to drive all the way west to Paris, France, or south to China, south to Beijing, or Harbin, or Shanghai. For this reason, the Chinese are actually partially interested in this project themselves. And I think any financial loophole or gap that would need to be filled, the Chinese could possibly be convinced into donating to this project. Because I believe that Chinese trade right now, of course, has to go by ship over the Pacific Ocean. Trading over a road network that crosses into the United States would actually save them a very, not an insignificant amount of money. So all of this stuff would come through the little and big Diomede Islands. And of course, they would become the world's most remote pit stops, with significant amount of truck and other vehicular traffic crossing the strait and going through the islands. And with the islands needing to serve as a pit stop and a travel stop of its own, it would also become a customs station, because of course the international border runs between the islands, so you'd have to have a spot on that smaller bridge between Little and Big Diomede where the customs station would have to be built, of course, on the bridge and over the water. So this would change everything for the islands. But today, Little Diomede is a subsistence economy with very minimal services, and Big Diomede is a military base station with no civilian population at all. So there it is, guys. That is where Russia and the United States are less than 3 miles apart. Go find it on a map sometime, and you'll see for yourselves, but the remote location makes things very, very challenging in this part of the world. so far north and cold that not even the deadliest catch boats come within really 100 miles of the islands. So that is your story there of Big Diomede and Little Diomede Islands, where Russia and America come within 3 miles of each other. Hope you enjoyed this, and as much as I enjoyed even researching it, but you folks have a good night. We'll see you later, and peace out, homies.